Welcome, everyone. I'm Linda Blackshaw, your host and producer of Soul Heart Mind TV. And tonight we're going to be talking about divination and the different kinds of divination that there are and what sort of things that you can expect from them. Now, a popular form of divination in Scotland is reading tea leaves. And there is a set requirement. A white cup is a must, because as one tea leaf reader who came to my house said when she'd been somewhere else, you can't see the leaves against a black cup. And you drain the cup, and then you turn it upside down into the saucer. And if I remember correctly, it's clockwise for a woman and counterclockwise for a man. You do that 3 times. And then the person who's doing the reading looks in the bottom of your cup and sees a variety of shapes. And that is a lot of fun. My late mother-in-law used to read tea leaves, and she correctly predicted the birth of her sister's grandchildren. Nora hadn't told anyone that she was having twins, but her Auntie Lizzie saw it in the tea leaves. And certainly a few times I've had my leaves read, it has been fairly accurate. Now, the biggest divination system is cards. And you have got the tarot cards, you've got oracle cards, animal cards, color cards, the cartouche, and the Dakini oracle. Now, with the oracle cards, anyone can read them because the books are quite good. You can just pick a card, look at the book. Oracle cards too tend to be very positive, whereas the tarot, you get whatever the reader can expect to see. Now, with the tarot, I would expect that most readers would have some form of clairvoyance. I've used clairvoyance as the overriding one because that is the most well known, and that's for seeing. So that if a reader was more prevalent with clairvoyance, they would probably say, I see this. The other ones are clairaudience, which is to hear, claircognizance, which is to know, and taste, which is clairgustance, and clairolfactrance, which is quite hard to say, is for smell. And of course, the one that I have, which is clairsentience. So a lot of my readings, I would be going, I feel. However, at some stage or other, I have had experience with all of them, tasting something disgusting in my mouth and smelling tobacco, to name just two things. And sometimes I've smelt particular perfumes as well when I've been doing a reading. Now, the tarot is made up of the minor and major arcana, which we talked about last week. And as I said, we've got animal cards, color cards. There is the cartouche, which I do have. That's the one. I don't use them very much, mainly because you have to begin each time with the deck in numerical order, well, according to the beautiful book that you have with it. But I have used them for myself occasionally, and they have been quite fun to do. Another interesting deck, which I do have, and I have used occasionally, is what they call the Dakini oracle. And again, like the cartouche, it is suggested that you do them only in numerical order. So again, it's not a very popular one. So here's one of the cards, and you can see that they're quite fun. This one is Asylum, and it's a horse up a tree. So that's quite a different deck as well. But you could use them the way I use my cards. When I'm doing a proper reading, a one-on-one reading, I get the client to pick 3 animal cards, 3 oracle cards. They then shuffle the tarot, and then once I've done the whole of that reading, they pick 3 mermaid and dolphin cards, which is the only Doreen Virtue deck that I use at the moment. We also have the pendulum. Now, the pendulum it has been used for a long, long while, because I'm quite sure most women out there will have put a wedding ring on the end of a piece of string and tried to work out how many children that they were going to have, or the sex of a baby. I was quite horrified when I did mine when I was a teenager, because I was supposed to have 6 children, but I stopped after 3. So was my interference stopped that pendulum being right? I don't know. But you can get a pendulum like this, which you can buy the cage and then put your own crystal in it. That piece of crystal is actually a piece of copper. So I have used that one, but my favorite pendulum at the moment is this one, which is a sodalite. Whoops, sorry, is a sodalite. And how you use the pendulum is that you put it over your finger like that, so that you can hold it, which is very difficult for me to do because I've got to hold it up there like that. You ask it to show you yes, and in my case, it's an anti-clockwise movement, and then you ask it to stop, and then you ask it to show you no. The other way of doing it is to ask it yes, no questions that you know the answer. Sometimes it doesn't move. You can find out timing using a pendulum by holding it up to a glass. You do have to define it, because obviously if you asked for months, and it was actually 2 years, well, you'd be standing there a long time while it counted out 24 months. You can also draw a semicircle and mark it off, so that you could have maybe, perhaps, or different answers to your question to expand it further with the from the yes, no. I have found it to be fairly reliable. I haven't used it in as much as the tarot cards, but it has. Many people have said that it has been very beneficial for them to do. And again, it's something that it's easier for you to do yourself, whereas I find the tarot very difficult to read for myself, because I know what some of the cards mean, and if that's what I really want to have happen, am I seeing it because it's truly going to happen, or am I just grasping it at straws? Another popular means of divination is psychometry. And that is where someone holds an object. Quite often it's a piece of jewelry, but you can also get readings from a photograph. And the Spiritualist Church, they use psychometry, and they get people to bring along a flower. And that's a very interesting way of seeing a flower reading, because I'm only going by the ones in Australia that I have been to. And when you go in, there's a large board with a number, and that's where you put your flower. So the people that are doing the readings do not know who you're connecting with. And because it's a spiritualist church, quite often the flower is used to connect with your loved ones in spirit. And it's quite fascinating watching this, because it will come up, and sometimes it tells you they tell you things that are happening during the day, and other times it can be quite amusing. I was at one where the medium was talking about it was talking about seeing somebody stealing apples. And it was an elder gentleman who he was reading for, and he did confess that he and a friend had indeed nipped over the fence and taken some of the apples to eat. It does seem to be fairly accurate. I will say that with psychometry, sometimes what people will get is what's happened at the time of the photograph. So if it's not an up-to-date photograph, then that can happen. That also happened to me when somebody wanted a distance reading, and I asked them to send me a photograph. I did the reading and sent it back, and what they found was that it was highly accurate, but I had actually described what was round about the time of the photograph being taken. So now, if someone wants me to do a distance reading using a photograph, I do require that it's going to be as up to date as you can get it, or you're just going to run the risk of being told stuff that you already know. Now, I don't know much about numerology in the sense that I know what number I am, and I know that it describes your personality, and can certainly be used to pinpoint key points in your life. However, how much of a future prediction for numerology, I'm not 100% sure. However, I think in the hands of the right person, it very probably can, because if you get someone that's psychic, then using the focus of the numbers is very possible for them to look forward. Astrology as well is a more mathematical, more scientific means of doing readings, and again, it can be very specific. Obviously, I'm not talking about the weekly horoscope or the monthly horoscopes, which are just general and are very similar to my general card readings. Only some of you are it's only going to happen to some of you. But it is fascinating because there is different branches of astrology, and I think in future months I'll either get an astrologer to come in and talk about all of them, or maybe track down different types of astrologers. I do know that there's something called horology, and I believe that is the one where they can answer specific questions looking at the time you were born and then looking at the relationship with the planets at the time of the question. But that would be an interesting thing, I think, to follow through on. The aura, some people can see and interpret auras. Again, I believe that they would probably have to have one of the clairs so that they would be clairaudient, etc., because they're focusing on the color. The other two that I have down here at the moment is palmistry and handwriting analysis. And I think with them, it's probably more scientific in that obviously with the palm and with hand analysis, they are very much looking at the oh, sorry, not the handwriting, the palmistry. They're looking at the palm and everything. And then I do have a friend who uses finger trips for her as her divinatory practice. And that's a very fascinating thing, and I'll definitely be getting her to come on to talk about it because it is very, very fascinating. Another divination is the runes, and they're probably the most fascinating in that you could. Oh no, this one. I'll have to look it up, find out what this one is, but you can do these yourself. You can get some wood. I purchased these ones, but you could get some glass, have them all round about the same size, and then you could draw the runes on them yourself. Now, runes are fascinating for me in that before you draw a rune, you have to ask whether it's okay to draw one. And sometimes they just don't stick to you. And then other times the rune that you want, you're trying to pick up one, but there's another one, and that's the only one you can pick up. So that's an interesting divination. But there's coffee grounds, there's reading the bones, there's reading crystals. Some people have created crystal card decks. I use one of them, as you saw in some of my readings here and on Facebook, is that I use a deck of crystal cards. There's rune cards, there's numerology cards, there's the I Ching cards, which are quite interesting. You can use the I Ching coins, and that I find that interesting, but it didn't appeal to me because you had to throw them up in the air. And if I remember rightly, you had to create lines of three of the with the coins, and then you looked at a book to see what each one meant, and then you put it together. Uh, there's feng shui astrology, which is the Chinese astrology, and there's very probably other forms of divination that I haven't looked at this evening. It's only going to be a short. Uh, it's much shorter than I thought it would be, but I think it gives you an idea of what different people can try and do. Now, for those of you that want to try different things, I would encourage you to maybe try tea leaf reading, because that's fun, and that's how I discovered that I could read tea leaves. I would also suggest that you tried with the pendulum. Try just have a play and see what appeals to you. Now, if you are looking at getting a deck of cards, whether they're oracle cards or tarot cards, I would take your time, because if you don't connect with the cards, one of the things is you won't use them, and two, it'll be harder to do readings from them. Now, one of my daughters has said that looking at cards or looking at the runes, it's like telling a story. And certainly, I think if you go into that and into it thinking that and going, I have to create a story, you may find that it's easier to move into. I do suggest, and this is how I teach it in my lessons, is that you look at the card, allow the card to talk to you, and you do not look at the book until you have either written down what you're seeing or you've said what you're seeing. Because the more you do that, the more your own psychic ability is going to come through, and you can explore how far you want to take it. And then you look at the book. Now, I was using the Mythic Tarot deck, and at that stage, the Mythic Tarot deck did not actually come with a book. And so I just had the cards, a nice cloth. And I was doing very well with the deck. People that got readings from the deck were really happy. They reported it was very highly accurate. But there was one card, and it was a red-headed youth on the back of a ram, sort of like leaping. And for whatever reason, I couldn't relate to that card. And I mean, I said what I felt, and I had to go into the bookshop and look at the workbook that was with the Mythic Tarot. And I was greatly relieved when I checked what the meaning of the card was. I was on the right path, so I was able to relax. I do believe that if you can read one deck of tarot cards, you can very probably read another. The ones that would probably give you the most difficulty are the ones, there's a Russian deck, and I believe there's another deck, and I don't know what it's called, but there's a Russian deck, which the cards, when joined together, create a further story. So you've got a square card, and when it joins to another square card, you have a further square in the middle that tells you another part of the story. So I haven't tried to read them, but I do find them very fascinating. And I do feel that very probably, not probably, I do feel that when I come across them the next time, I will be buying them so I can have a play with them. I mentioned that you can use the crystals, and again, I think the crystals are a little bit like the throwing the bones or throwing the shells, or even looking at the runes, is that you read them individually, but you also look at them, what they mean together. So the other thing I would say, particularly if you're going to read tarot cards or oracle cards, is play with the cards, get to know the cards, become comfortable with the cards, and then have a go at creating your own spreads, because that's what I did, because I found that many of the spreads that I learned from books, while very good, they were confining to where I wanted to go. I would also suggest that before you do a reading, that you call in some form of protection, only because I think it's a security blanket for yourselves. I think it's common sense. I think by burning incense, lighting candles, sitting, imagining white light coming down, you're setting the scene for your reading. So any of these that I mentioned, you could in your head do that. And I think at the end of the reading, I think it's good for you to actually give thanks. Now, some of the decks come with a little prayer that you can say before you start, but you don't need to do that. But I think if you're going to embrace reading tarot cards, it's my belief if you're doing it properly, you will have guides. So you invite your guides in at the beginning, and you give thanks at the end for the help that you've given they've given you. Now, for myself, when I first started doing readings, I had 3 guides. I have never named my guides. I have never felt the need to name my guides, and they have never felt the need to give themselves names. For the ones that that come and help me when I'm doing my tarot. Now, over the years, I've been interpreting the tarot cards since 1982, 83. I've been reading tea leaves probably since 1984, 85. So that came a little bit later. But with my tarot reading, as I say, when I first started, one guide spoke in numbers, one guide it was healing. So if he was there, so there was headaches, there was sinuses, there was sick dogs, there was sort of like this. It was a heavier type of reading, and then the other one liked corny phrases to the extent that he occasionally made them up. And all 3 of my divinatory guides at that stage came through as male energy. And now I just have one guide. I do feel he is male. This is just purely for my divination. And he is this side of me when I'm doing readings. And so sometimes if I'm doing readings, if you remember this, you might see it when I'm doing readings online, is that I'll look as if I'm looking and I'm listening to that side of me. And if anyone is this side of me, it's people who have passed on, and they will try and give you something that's quite clearly for them, whether it's the type of tobacco they used, whether it was their favorite hobby, how they passed. They will try and give you something. At the moment, I don't tend to get a lot of names, and I think that's my resistance rather than anything on their time, because I just have this horror of being like the aging psychic I saw, and came to someone in the front row and was adamant that it was the woman's husband, and she kept giving, I can't remember the name now, but it certainly wasn't the name of this poor woman in the front row. So I think that's why I have a resistance to names. However, in saying that, if a name comes up, I will give it. I also believe if you're going to go into reading tarot cards, you have to say what you see. If you're not clear, if you can't really see it clearly, then just say that and let it go. Because and I will give you the rider that with tarot cards, you do run the risk of seeing possibly more negative things happening. Whereas if you're using oracle cards, I don't believe that there's anything in any of the oracle decks I've come across so far that have had very much negativity in them. And I can remember when I first started doing tarot cards, somebody said to me, "Oh, I'm not going to come and see you unless you tell me, you promise to only tell me good things." And I said, "Well, don't come and see me." I said, "Because I don't think I'm that good an actress, that if I did see something that was a little, that was very possibly a warning, I don't think I could keep it to myself, because I think she would guess." I do think she did come for a reading and everything went well. No, for timing, I do believe the pendulum, as I said earlier, is probably the best. There are various cards in the decks that can tell you a little bit of the timing, but what I have found with my own experience is that when a reader says soon, it may not be as soon as our humanness wants us to have it. So patience sometimes is needed. Their concept of soon and our concept of soon is a little bit different. Now, I believe that any form of divination, there should be at least 25% to 30% accuracy of what you're being told. This, I did get that from a book. However, I would also say that it should be feasible, that you can go, okay, yes, I can see that happening. But in saying that, it's sometimes the crazy things that we don't know until afterwards. I remember doing a reading. Now I lived in Meriden, which is in the middle of the country, and we're not near any major bodies of water. We don't have a river running through it, so it's sort of very much a landlocked farming country in roundabout Meriden. And I could see the America's cap, because I could see the winged keel that was under the Australian boat. And I eventually said to the woman, I said, "I don't know what I'm seeing." I said, "But this is a good thing, and it's the America's cap." And afterwards, she did tell me that she did have a connection with the America's Cup, which was it's really wonderful. And that's the other thing, that if you're going to do any form of reading, you need to get guinea pigs, so that the guinea pigs can come back to you and say that was accurate, because that validation of what you're saying increases your increases your talent, increases your gift. It expands it, because you gain in confidence, you relax, and you're more open to receiving more. Now, I do hope you have enjoyed my talk on the different forms of divination. I did find it interesting looking them all up. Particularly finding out what taste and smell were in the clairs, because I certainly knew the clairaudient, claircognizance, and clairsentience and clairvoyance, and I hadn't heard clairgustance and clairolfactance, although I had experienced the taste in my mouth and the smells coming through with readings. So I bid you all good night, or good morning, depending on when you're watching this. And I hope to see you next week, when I will be interviewing a very interesting lady by the name of Lalaine de La Doris. I knew I would stutter with the L. So I do hope that you'll look in to find out more about Lalaine and fashion, finance, and fitness, which are the 3 Fs, and what direction she is moving on in her life, and in creating a coaching business, and she's a very fascinating woman. So I do hope that you will join me, and I shall say good night.